Imagine being stranded in the coldest, most unforgiving place on Earth. Temperatures plummet to -43 degrees Celsius. Winds scream at over 320 kilometers per hour. You're surrounded by endless ice, with no food, no rescue, and no hope. This is Antarctica, the fifth largest continent where 98% of the land is buried under a frozen blanket. And this is the story of Ernest Shackleton, a man who stared death in the face not once, not twice, but 3 times, and led his crew through the impossible. Get ready for an epic tale of courage, survival, and the unbreakable human spirit that'll leave you on the edge of your seat. Stay tuned. This is a journey you won't forget. Antarctica is a world like no other. Spanning 14 million square kilometers, it's a frozen giant where life clings to the edge. Its geographic South Pole, the southernmost point on Earth, was a mystery no human had reached until the early 20th century. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, a fever gripped Europe and America, an obsession with exploration. Adventurers raced to conquer uncharted lands from the peaks of Everest to the depths of the Arctic. But Antarctica? It was the ultimate prize. This era, known as the heroic age of Antarctic exploration, saw men risk everything to etch their names in history. Among them was Ernest Shackleton, a man whose thirst for adventure would take him to the brink of death and back. Born on February 15, 1874 in County Kildare, Ireland, Ernest Shackleton wasn't cut out for a quiet life. As a boy, he cared little for school. While his peers memorized textbooks, young Ernest dreamed of far-off lands and daring quests. His imagination was fueled by tales of explorers like Christopher Columbus and Ferdinand Magellan. At 16, he couldn't wait any longer. He joined the Merchant Navy, trading classrooms for the open sea. The ocean was a harsh teacher. Storms, shipwrecks, and grueling labor taught him resilience, navigation, and leadership. By his early 20s, Shackleton was a seasoned sailor, but his heart was set on one destination: Antarctica. In 1901, Shackleton got his chance. The British launched the Discovery Expedition, led by Robert Falcon Scott, a naval officer with a reputation for discipline. Their mission was bold: to reach the South Pole, a feat no one had accomplished. Shackleton, then 27, joined as a third officer. On December 21, 1901, their ship set sail from New Zealand, slicing through icy waters toward Antarctica. By February 8, 1902, they anchored at McMurdo Sound, a strategic bay where the sea remains ice-free in summer, offering a shorter route to the pole. For months, the team explored the continent's edges, mapping uncharted territory and battling brutal conditions. The real test came on November 2, 1902. Scott Shackleton and scientist Edward Wilson set out for the South Pole, hauling supplies with 22 Siberian dogs. They faced a nightmare of blizzards, crevasses, and temperatures that froze their breath. The dogs, unsuited for Antarctica's extreme cold, began to weaken and die. Food ran low. The men suffered from snow blindness, where glaring ice damages the eyes, and scurvy, a disease caused by vitamin C deficiency. Shackleton's health deteriorated the most, his body racked by coughs and fatigue. Yet they pressed on, driven by sheer will. On December 30, 1902, they reached 82 degrees 17 minutes south, 900 kilometers from the pole, but closer than anyone had ever come. It was a record, but victory was out of reach. With no dogs left, the men hauled their sledges themselves, inching through deep snow. Frostbite gnawed at their fingers and toes. Realizing they couldn't go further without dying, Scott made the call to turn back. For 93 days, they had trekked 1,540 kilometers, pushing the limits of human endurance. On February 3, 1903, they staggered back to their ship, barely alive. Doctors treated their ailments, and within weeks, they recovered. But the South Pole remained unconquered, a taunting dream. Most people would have called it quits. Not Shackleton. Failure only fueled his fire. He returned to England, but the call of Antarctica was too strong. From 1903 to 1907, he tried a normal life, working as a magazine journalist, a secretary for the Scottish Royal Geographical Society, even a public relations officer at a steelworks. But these jobs felt like cages. His heart belonged to the ice. By 1907, Shackleton was ready to lead his own expedition. His goal? To be the first to reach the South Pole. Raising funds was a battle. Antarctica wasn't cheap. Shackleton pitched his plan to wealthy businessmen, charming them with his passion and grit. His biggest backer was William Beardmore, a British industrialist who helped him secure $30,000, a fortune at the time, though still modest for such an ambitious mission. With the money, Shackleton bought a 40-year-old sealing ship called the Nimrod. He recruited 14 men from scientists to sailors and learned from past mistakes. The Discovery expedition's dogs had failed, so Shackleton bought 15 Manchurian ponies, hoping their strength would conquer the ice. He also packed 9 dogs as a backup. On February 11, 1907, Shackleton presented his plan to the Royal Geographical Society. The audience was skeptical. 30,000 was a fraction of what modern missions like NASA's Mars rovers cost. But Shackleton's determination was infectious. He aimed to set up a base at McMurdo Sound, the same spot Scott had used. This sparked tension. Scott, planning his own return to Antarctica, claimed McMurdo Sound as his territory. Shackleton, loyal to his former commander, promised to use Barrier Inlet instead. But when the Nimrod set sail on January 1, 1908, fate had other plans. By January 23rd, the team reached Barrier Inlet, only to find it gone. Rising temperatures had melted the ice shelf into the sea. The remaining surface was too unstable for a winter base. Shackleton faced a dilemma. His second option, King Edward VII Land, was blocked by moving icebergs, risking the ship's safety. Reluctantly, he broke his promise to Scott and headed for McMurdo Sound. On January 29, 1908, they established their base there, setting the stage for an extraordinary journey. The Nimrod expedition wasn't just about the South Pole. In March 1908, Shackleton and his team achieved a historic first, climbing Mount Erebus, Antarctica's second highest volcano at 3,792 meters. It was the southernmost active volcano, a fiery contrast to the icy landscape. The climb was treacherous, with jagged rocks and freezing winds, but their success boosted morale. Then came winter, March to October in the southern hemisphere, when darkness and cold halt all exploration. The team hunkered down, planning their polar trek. On October 29, 1908, Shackleton, Jameson Adams, Eric Marshall, and Frank Wild began their South Pole journey. With ponies pulling their sledges, they moved faster than Scott's team had. By November 26, they crossed 82 degrees 1 minute south, surpassing Scott's record in just 29 days. Their efficiency came from Shackleton's planning. He avoided Scott's errors, like overloading sledges. But the ponies struggled. By December 7th, all had died, forcing the men to haul their gear. Food dwindled. Shackleton's diary described the ordeal as the hardest journey of my life. On December 31st, they reached 87 degrees south, breaking every record. But the South Pole was still 157 kilometers away. By January 4, 1909, Shackleton faced reality. Pushing further meant certain death. They lacked the food for a return trip. On January 9th, they hit 88 degrees 23 minutes south, just 97.5 miles from the pole. It was a triumph, but Shackleton prioritized survival. He shared his rations, especially biscuits, with Frank Wild, who was battling dysentery. This act of leadership forged a bond Wild never forgot, writing, "That single biscuit was worth more than 1,000 pounds." The return was brutal. Blizzard slowed them, hunger gnawed. By late January, the team battled enteritis, an infection from eating spoiled pony meat. On February 23rd, they reached Bluff Depot, a supply cache left by their crew. It saved their lives. But on February 26th, a storm trapped them. By February 27th, they were 61 kilometers from base, with Marshall collapsing from exhaustion. Shackleton and Wild sprinted to the ship, only to find it gone on March 1st. Desperate, they lit a fire, sending black smoke into the sky. Miraculously, the Nimrod's crew spotted it and returned. Over the next 2 days, Adams and Marshall were rescued. Shackleton had done it again, cheated death and saved his team. When Shackleton returned to England on July 10, 1909, he was a hero. King Edward VII greeted him personally, and the world celebrated his record-breaking journey. but the South Pole still eluded him. On December 14, 1911, Norwegian explorer Roald Amundsen reached the pole, beating Scott, who arrived 34 days later only to find Amundsen's flag. Scott's team perished on the return, a tragedy that shook the exploration world. Shackleton, undeterred, set a new goal: to cross the entire Antarctic continent. In 1913, Shackleton announced the Imperial Trans-Antarctic expedition. His plan was audacious: trek 2,767 kilometers from the Weddell Sea to McMurdo Sound, crossing the continent on foot. 2 ships, the Endurance and Aurora, would support the mission. The Endurance would carry Shackleton's team to the Weddell Sea, while the Aurora, led by Captain Aeneas McIntosh, would supply depots from McMurdo Sound. On November 5, 1914, the Endurance reached South Georgia, an Atlantic island with a whaling station called Grytviken. After a month of planning, they sailed into the Weddell Sea on December 5th. Disaster struck quickly. By December 7th, the Endurance hit pack ice, floating ice chunks that locked the ship in place. Shackleton hoped the ice would drift toward open water, but it didn't. From December to February, the ship was stuck. As winter loomed, the ice hardened, crushing the Endurance's hull. The pressure was immense. Ice slabs collided, bending the ship's timber. Water flooded in. On October 27, 1915, at 26 degrees Celsius, Shackleton ordered the crew to abandon ship. They salvaged 3 lifeboats and supplies, camping on the ice. For months, they drifted on ice floes, enduring hunger and cold. By April 1916, the ice began to break, and they launched the lifeboats, aiming for Elephant Island, 500 kilometers away. After a harrowing week battling storms and icy waves, they landed on April 15th. But Elephant Island was remote and uninhabited. No ships passed by. Rescue seemed impossible. Shackleton made a daring decision. He and 5 others, Frank Worsley, Tom Crean, Tim McCarthy, Harry McNish, and John Vincent, would sail 1,300 kilometers across the Southern Ocean, one of the world's deadliest seas, to South Georgia. On April 26, 1916, they boarded the James Caird, a 7-meter lifeboat. The journey was a nightmare. Waves towered like mountains. Ice coated their clothes. On May 5th, a massive wave nearly capsized them, the largest Shackleton had seen in his 26-year career. After 14 days, they reached South Georgia's southern shore. But the whaling station was on the northern side, and their boat was too damaged to sail around. Shackleton, Worsley, and Crean trekked 36 hours across the island as rugged mountains and glaciers, a route no one had ever crossed. On May 20th, they staggered into Stromness Station. Rescuing the rest of the crew was agonizing. Pack ice blocked 3 attempts to reach Elephant Island. Shackleton used a whaling ship, then a Uruguayan vessel, and finally a Chilean ship called the Yelcho, captained by Luis Pardo. On August 30th, 1916, after 4 attempts, they rescued all 22 men. Miraculously, no one died. Shackleton's leadership, his refusal to abandon his crew, made this one of history's greatest survival stories. You'd think Shackleton would retire after such an ordeal, but Antarctica was his obsession. In 1921, he planned another expedition, funded by his friend John Quiller Rowett. The goal was to circumnavigate Antarctica, exploring uncharted regions. On September 24, 1921, the Quest ship set sail from England, but Shackleton's health was failing. In Rio de Janeiro, he suffered a minor heart attack, but refused to turn back. On January 4, 1922, the Quest reached South Georgia. That night, Shackleton complained of back pain and discomfort. His doctor, Alexander Macklin, urged him to abandon the mission. Shackleton refused, saying, "You always tell me to give up, but I won't." At 2:50 a.m. on January 5, 1922, Shackleton suffered a fatal heart attack. He was 47. The man who had escaped death in Antarctica 3 times died before his final journey began. His body was returned to South Georgia, where he was buried, forever tied to the land he loved. Shackleton never reached the South Pole or crossed Antarctica, yet his legacy towers over those who did. Roald Amundsen won the race to the pole, but Shackleton's story is about more than records. It's about leadership, sharing his last biscuit with a starving crewmate, risking his life to save his men. It's about courage, sailing a tiny boat through a raging ocean, and it's about the human spirit, refusing to surrender even when the odds are impossible. Today, Shackleton's name inspires adventurers, leaders, and dreamers. His expeditions taught us about survival, from navigating pack ice to enduring starvation. Antarctica remains a frontier, studied by scientists exploring climate change and extreme life. Shackleton's story reminds us that no matter how dark the storm, there's always a way through. So what's your impossible challenge? What's the adventure that calls you? Share it with the world, and keep Shackleton's spirit alive. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more epic journeys into the unknown. Ring the bell to stay updated. Share this with your friends and let's spread the thrill of adventure. Until next time, stay bold, stay curious, and keep exploring.